Hello everyone. Welcome to this workshop, which is designed to raise awareness of adult safeguarding. BSAC takes the safeguarding of all its members very seriously, and this workshop is part of a suite of measures that we've put in place. The majority of BSAC members are adults, and it's essential that every member is able to enjoy the sports of snorkelling and diving in a safe environment, be that as a direct member or amongst fellow sport enthusiasts within the club structure. When talking about adults, safeguarding is not just about body matters. It also concerns itself with emotional well-being and mental health. Therefore, adult safeguarding could be argued to be broader than child safeguarding and is potentially more complex. In addition, because the majority of BSAC members are adults, it could be said that there's a greater potential for the need for everyone to be more aware of their safeguarding responsibilities in order to ensure, support and protect the welfare of their fellow snorkelers and divers. So, first of all, Buddyguard. What is it? It's the adult safeguarding policy of BSAC and has just been fully reviewed and updated. It refers to the welfare of adults aged 18 years and over. A separate policy refers to the welfare of children under 18, which has also been recently fully reviewed and updated. As has just been said, welfare for adults means emotional well-being and mental health, as well as abuse. Why does BSAC need it? By law, the organisation needs such a policy because the greater majority of our members are adults. The policy is designed to provide guidance and information for club officers and members as to their responsibilities. The link to Buddyguard is there on your slide. So let's think more directly about Buddyguard and your club. Why is your club affected by this? The relevant section is 2.2, Duty of Care to BSAC adult members. As a part of the overall BSAC family of clubs, your club is obliged to adopt the policy. Like it or not, every club is connected to the overall organisation and is bound by its overarching policies and procedures. Safeguarding from harm is a shared responsibility, making it the responsibility of all club members. So in exactly the same way, as a member of BSAC, every member, whether direct or club member, is inherently bound by certain policies, and safeguarding is one of these. Thinking about each of you as individuals, how are you personally affected by this? As I just said, as a BSAC member and as a member of the public, you have a responsibility in the safeguarding of adults. But let's be absolutely clear. It isn't your responsibility to investigate concerns, even if you are the club welfare officer. And you shouldn't wait until you're certain something has happened before you report your concerns. As soon as you have a suspicion of a safeguarding concern, you should be reporting this. Waiting till you have solid proof can take quite a long time, which can prolong the suffering and make recovery harder for the adult in question. It is solely your responsibility to report any concerns, nothing more. If you're a member, report to the welfare officer, and if you are the welfare officer, report to the BSAC safeguarding lead. Anyone may at any time share something with you that causes you concern. It may not necessarily be a member of your club. It could be a friend or relative of a club member or someone you encounter otherwise, for example at the pub where your club meets. You may witness something that gives rise to concerns. Again, this could be anywhere, anytime. A concern does not necessarily result in social care action or in any other support being accessed, but every piece of information joins together to form a complete picture of the support that the individual may need. Identifying need is a complex jigsaw that can take time to put together, and the more pieces presented, the sooner that jigsaw can be completed. A valid question is why separate child and adult safeguarding? In the past, most organisations, including BSAC, have combined the safeguarding of children with the safeguarding of adults in respect of both training and policy. This is because many organisations are accessed by both adults and children, and it seemed easier and more convenient to have a single safeguarding policy. However, this is not recommended any longer. Children and adults face different issues in respect of safeguarding threats and risks. The definitions and terms differ when talking about child and adult safeguarding. Post-reporting procedures for professionals are not the same, because once you've reported your concerns, the pathways of investigation and handling of safeguarding concerns move into specific and dedicated child or adult specialist arenas. There is different national legislation that recognises that adults and children face different issues and that the pathways of post-reporting lead to specialist investigative processes. A combined policy tends to dilute the adult side because the focus tends to be on children, with an incorrect assumption that adults are all able to safeguard their own welfare. Therefore, because of this, a separate policy and procedure document ensures clarity of message and allows proper regard to be given to the vulnerable. There are two core differences between adult and child safeguarding policies. Firstly, adults have the right of self-determination. They can choose not to protect themselves if they so wish. A concern may be evident, but an adult has the right to decide and direct that no action be taken. It is only in extreme circumstances that the law will intervene. For example, if the adult is determined to lack capacity, i.e. unable to make decisions themselves regarding their own welfare, or if there are children in the household who may be adversely affected by the safeguarding concern. It is important that BSAC fosters a culture that embraces the adults themselves, informing and consulting them on all safeguarding decisions affecting them. The centralisation of the individual in the process is at the heart of all social and welfare policies. In other words, we are making safeguarding personal. Individual choice must be respected. There must be an outcome focus to adult safeguarding that allows the individual to be part of the solution, rather than problematising them and their situation. Therefore, it is essential to involve the adult in the safeguarding process, to learn, centralise and respect their views, wishes, feelings and beliefs. The well-being principle is a core part of adult safeguarding that sits alongside self-determination and making safeguarding personal in the essential consideration of culture, especially within BSAC. Well-being, according to the World Health Organization, is a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being, not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So when we look at well-being, we have to consider both physical and mental health, but also we must consider social, financial and digital well-being, although these may not all be applicable necessarily for snorkelling and diving. However, well-being is a concept that is different for everyone because we all have different life experiences, worldviews, goals and aims. Despite the strong emphasis on well-being in the Care Act, there is not and cannot be a single definition of what this means, because well-being is so personal that every one of us has our own unique understanding of it. Well-being relates to the things that the individual sees as a priority in their life at that moment. Just because they have no problem in a particular aspect does not mean that area is not important to them. Well-being encompasses a range of factors that are said to be non-hierarchical across all aspects of life. That means that none is more important or prominent than another. Plus, well-being changes over time for each individual. Life is not static, and the well-being of every one of us will change over time. That change can be quickly or dramatic, completely changing the individual's life and having a major impact on them and all the people involved with them. In diving and snorkelling, mental welfare affects the ability to function and participate, not just in training, but in a recreational dive or snorkel or in a trip away. Consideration of mental welfare has to become a core part of our culture, with an openness that embraces conversation and an absence of stigma, pressure, stress and psychological responses. We need to get to a point where a well-being check-in is the norm for instructors, dive buddies and dive managers. A simple personal conversation about well-being and any factors that may be a barrier to successful achievement of and participation in a pleasurable diving experience. So, the Club Welfare Officer. Does the Club Welfare Officer have a greater responsibility than other club members? To a certain degree possibly, but not especially. It's covered under Section 2.7, Role Description of the Club Welfare Officer. The Welfare Officer is the named point of contact for all members. They have a core responsibility to promote good practice within the club. They need to have a good knowledge of Buddyguard policy requirements and reporting procedures. Is the welfare officer a particular sort of person? Well, they should be approachable, interpersonal, level-headed, calm, rational, caring. They should be able to offer basic advice and keep records. They must be able to communicate with members and with BSAC staff. They have to be non-judgmental and not make assumptions or jump to conclusions. So, as you can see, there aren't any especially onerous skills demanded on the welfare officer. Anyone can take on the role. So let's think now more specifically about adult abuse. What is it? It's when an individual is intentionally targeted or harmed by another person or group of people. It can be over a period of time, but it can also be a one-off action. It can happen in person or online. Who does it? It could be anyone. There are no visible markers. Sadly, an abuser looks like any other member of society. Abusers can come from all backgrounds, ethnicities, income brackets, communities and walks of life. It could be your fellow club members, irrespective of how long you've known them or how well you think you know them. It could equally be the relatives or friends of members who belong to your club. However, the reality is that abusers are most often known to the individual. Adults are more likely than children to be abused by targeted abuse, such as telephone or online scams, but sadly, commonly, the abuser is someone known and trusted by the individual. What indicators of abuse and neglect can we look for? Unexplained bruises and injuries, particularly fingerprint bruising or a lack of medical attention for an injury. Belongings and or money going missing. Not attending or no longer enjoying their participation, which is particularly significant in snorkelling and diving. The individual may be losing or gaining weight or stops taking care of themselves and develops an unkempt appearance. You may notice a change in behaviour or confidence. The individual may begin to self-harm. They may display a fear of a particular group or individual. The individual may feel trusting enough of you to make a disclosure of abuse. There could be general evidence of harassment of the protected characteristics, that is, age, gender, gender reassignment, relationship, disability, race or religion. You may suspect that the individual's needs are not being met. Or it may be really blatant, such as an instructor intentionally striking a student. At this point, I have to briefly mention adults living with a disability. Having to live with some form of disability does not prevent people from snorkelling or diving. However, we do need to be mindful that individuals living with a disability or an impairment may be especially vulnerable to abuse, due to their increased likelihood of social isolation, having potentially fewer outside contacts and having limited access to someone to whom they can disclose abuse. Their heavy dependency on others for daily living, which may include intimate care. They may have an impaired capacity to resist, avoid or understand the abuse. Their impairments can affect their ability to communicate and therefore give rise to difficulties in reporting abuse. For all these reasons, people living with a disability are often viewed as a safe or a soft target for abusers. And in general, people living with a disability also experience higher levels of bullying than their peers. We need now to consider types and examples of abuse and neglect. Self-neglect is self-inflicted, failing to take care of oneself to the extent that it threatens personal health and safety or leads to the inability to avoid harm, so neglecting one's personal care, health or surroundings. Modern slavery is the exploitation of someone for personal or commercial profit, including human trafficking, forced labour or domestic servitude. Domestic abuse does not always involve violence. Coercive control involves assault, threats, humiliation and intimidation to harm, punish or frighten the victim into carrying out someone else's will. It involves psychological, physical, sexual, financial and/or emotional abuse, and often entails what is known as honour-based violence. Discriminatory abuse is abuse centred on perceived differences. In other words, discriminating against someone because of a perception of them. For this reason, it is important to always discuss the training plan, for example, with the trainee to ensure they are happy with it and understand any variations from what they may see themselves doing and against what another trainee may be doing. Organisational abuse can be one-off or ongoing maltreatment, and BSAC will not tolerate any form of organisational abuse. Financial and/or material abuse is when the control of money or other resources, the theft, fraud, scamming, coercion or misuse or misappropriation of funds or equipment. In clubs, suspicions of financial or material abuse arise, for example, where there is no transparency in club accounting, or where there are deliberately inflated costs for training or trips, or even where club resources are deployed not for the benefit of all club members. For example, personal use of a club boat. Physical abuse is defined by violent actions, including hitting, slapping, pushing, kicking, misuse of medication, restraint, or inappropriate sanctions. In terms of snorkelling and diving, this may include pushing a member into training or depth progression before they're ready, emotionally or physically, or expecting the individual to use very badly fitting or inappropriate equipment, such as a wetsuit in winter, or insisting on continuing a dive when the trainee is cold or running short of gas, just to finish off a particular skill or a lesson. Sexual abuse includes rape, indecent exposure, sexual harassment, inappropriate looking or touching, sexual teasing or innuendo, sexual photography, subjection to pornography, witnessing sexual acts or assault or sexual acts to which the adult has not consented or was pressured into consenting. Sexual abuse is not solely perpetrated by adult males. Women can also commit acts of sexual abuse, as can children. Age is not a factor. Individuals of any age may be sexually abused by someone of any age. Both men and women may be sexually abused by both men and women. In terms of snorkelling and diving, this could occur in the pool environment or in warm open water situations when the individual may be in a swimming costume or shorts and t-shirt. Training can be a very up-close and hands-on activity. A particular bond often forms between a trainee and their instructor. The instructor is a role model and exerts a powerful influence over a novice diver. They need to be aware of this and manage it appropriately. Emotional abuse is also known as psychological abuse. It includes threats of harm or abandonment, deprivation of contact, humiliation, blaming, controlling, intimidation, coercion, harassment, verbal abuse, isolation, or withdrawal from services or supportive networks. In a diving or snorkelling context, this may emerge in the way that a trainee understands the training feedback from the instructor, the words used to refer to the trainee or to speak to them, or the manner in which the instructor checks for learning during theory lessons. It may also be seen in the comments and jokes some members circulate on club social media platforms without regard to how other members may interpret these, or how members behave and conduct themselves when they come together in person. What is seen as normal banter by one group of members may be misunderstood or considered offensive by another. Neglect includes ignoring medical or physical care needs, failure to provide access to appropriate health, social care or educational services, the withholding of the necessities of life such as medication, adequate nutrition and heating. In terms of diving and snorkelling, this could be in the duration of a practical training session, either in the pool or open water, when the individual may become cold, or in failure to protect an individual from the elements, either hot or cold, on the surface through deprivation of food, drink or comfort facilities. It may be tempting to push through and stay underwater longer or make that extra dive in the day in order to complete a particular lesson or skill. But be mindful of the effect on the trainee and whether this is really necessary or conducive to their ultimate perception or enjoyment of diving. There are some other forms of abuse that are potentially relevant to adult safeguarding but are not included in the Care Act of 2014. Cyberbullying is repeatedly mocking, belittling, teasing or tormenting online by email, text or online forum. Forced marriage is where one or both individuals do not or cannot consent to the marriage, and pressure or abuse is used to force them into it without their consent or against the will of one or both. Mate crime is when someone is befriended because they are perceived as vulnerable and able to be exploited. This most often happens in private. Radicalization is attracting someone to a particular reasoning or views through developing a relationship with them or through targeted social media posts. Female genital mutilation, or FGM, is the partial or total removal of external female genitalia for non-medical reasons. Hate crime is much the same as bullying, motivated by hostility to the protected characteristics. It can be difficult to distinguish poor practice from abuse. Snorkelling and scuba diving can be a very hands-on and up-close and personal process, so ensure a plain view dry run is carried out before entering the water. Members and welfare officers must not investigate or confirm abuse is taking place, but report poor practice and any potential abuse as soon as their suspicions emerge. Members should report their concerns to the welfare officer. The welfare officer should report to the BSAC Safeguarding Lead. If a disclosure is made to you or if you have a suspicion, then, as I said before, your primary responsibility is reporting the concern. First of all, your reaction is important and sets the mood for the individual's following engagement with the process. Listen carefully. Do not show any emotional response. Ensure that the individual is safe from further abuse or harm. Do not make any guarantees or promises that you do not know you can definitely keep. Record what you're being told. Write down exactly what you are told, verbatim, recording what is fact, i.e. what the individual is telling you, and what you have supposed, concluded or witnessed. This avoids forgetting, misremembering or asking the person to repeat detail later. If the individual is willing, you may make a video or voice recording. Having worked up the courage to get the disclosure off their chest, the last thing the individual wants or needs is to have to repeat themselves. Report immediately. Inform the welfare officer if you are a club member. If you are the welfare officer, report to the BSAC Safeguarding Lead. General guidelines, if you have a concern, are covered in section 3.4, how to respond to concerns. Welfare overrides Data Protection Act. This is not a barrier to sharing information. Ensure the involvement and consent of the individual wherever possible. Be open and honest with them about why, what, how, and with whom information will or could be shared. Seek advice if you're in any doubt without disclosing the identity of the person if possible, but do not allow the seeking of advice to delay reporting your concerns. Any shared information must be absolutely necessary for the purpose for which you are sharing it and shared only with those who need to have it. Make a note of your decision on whether to share what you've been told or not and the reasons why you decided to share it or not. So if you share anything, record what you have shared, when you shared it, with whom and for what purpose. The abuse of adults can often give rise to significant media attention. If this happens, then the media will be on the hunt for material for their articles. If you, as a member or the welfare officer, are contacted by the media, do not, under any circumstance, give any response or comment. Do not engage with any reporters or any contact by email, telephone or any other means for your views or comments. Refer the contact to BSAC Head Office who will deal with the request appropriately. Now, having looked at some of the factual aspects of abuse and the safeguarding of adults, let's have a look at some of the myths and concerns that can arise within clubs and amongst members in respect of adult safeguarding. We're all mates in a club, so abuse couldn't or wouldn't happen. That's not actually true. You know your fellow club members to the extent that they allow you to. You may know very little of their life outside the club environment. Many snorkelers and divers make a very clear decision that diving is their thing and deliberately do not involve or include their spouses, partners or children. So you know only what they present to you. Remember that abuse can be a one-off action, so someone could suddenly snap in a situation and commit an abusive action. Everyone has a trigger point and you can never know when it will be reached. What begins as a seemingly innocent action can become abusive over time. It can be that what begins as joking and seemingly innocent banter can be pushed too far. If the culprits don't recognise the effect their behaviour is having on an individual and cease, it can become abusive for that individual. Being mates can appear bullying to other members, e.g., man up, you're a diver, don't be a wimp, it's not cold, etc. Whether this is in person or as banter on club social media chats. I'm sure we've all heard comments like these that have made us uncomfortable, whether directed at us personally or at others, and we didn't feel it appropriate to challenge. Well, it is appropriate and we should challenge. What was acceptable in years gone by is now recognised as not being so and should be challenged immediately. It can be done in a gentle and polite way, and eventually the culprit's behaviour will modify. It just has to be a simple, that's unacceptable, or please don't say things like that. No one likes to be challenged, but it's by allowing behaviour to continue that we fail to instigate change. I'd recognise if any of the club members were being abused or had emotional or mental health issues. Really, would you? What is the abuse looking like? How is the abuse manifesting itself? What do emotional and mental health issues look like? It's worth remembering that people can be embarrassed at what's happening to them if they realise that they're being abused, so they can try to hide it. It can be very difficult for an individual to open up and admit what is happening, even to a dive buddy they've known for a long time. The abuser may be someone who's not a member of your club, but the victim may be a member of your club. There is a pressure to present as normal and hide emotional or mental health issues if the individual recognises them. It takes a huge amount of courage to share personal matters like these. There's a perceived pressure in society to hide personal problems, especially amongst men who are often brought up to believe that they should always appear strong and in control, so they struggle to confide in others. People also often feel uncomfortable when someone else talks of emotional or mental health issues, and so try to avoid such conversations or even avoid that individual altogether. But everyone has emotions, and it's natural that at times we will all struggle. So every member should feel able to talk openly if they so wish. People with emotional and mental health issues would be on medication, so precluded from diving. Well, that is absolutely untrue. Emotional well-being and mental health issues, once they've been recognised, are dealt with in a range of ways, and many people do not have formal treatment. Many emotional and mental health issues are derived from trauma and stress, so may take some time to become apparent. A member may therefore not suffer such issues when they join the club. It has to be said, though, that diving is recognised as a positive therapy in itself. Therefore, an individual may be attracted to it because of its emotionally therapeutic effect. A common treatment is talking therapy, otherwise known as counselling. Medication is actually more of a last resort treatment and is often prescribed due to other symptoms and issues being present. There is, however, no formal treatment for many emotional and mental health conditions because the individual can function perfectly well within society and is no risk to anyone. They simply suffer the after effects of past trauma. So patience and understanding in a supportive atmosphere amongst fellow club members is what is required. can't be welfare officer because I have no training, so I'm not qualified. It is certainly the case that many clubs do not appoint a specific welfare officer. A common cited reason for someone not putting themselves up for the role is they have no training, so they're not qualified. But you don't need to be an expert in safeguarding. BSAC provides access to training, and this is just one example of that. There is a lot of information online, for example the Anne Craft Trust, to develop your knowledge and awareness. There are also a lot of sources of support, professional advice and guidance, and the list of resources is at the end of this presentation. All you need is a level head and a good awareness of Buddyguard. Being welfare officer is a really responsible or scary role, and I might be pulled into all kinds of uncomfortable situations. This is another commonly cited reason that members don't want to become welfare officer. But let's keep this in perspective. Abuse remains relatively rare in the case of both adults and children. We are just making sure that in case something does arise, members, clubs and the overall organisation are aware of their roles and responsibilities and have the knowledge to be able to act appropriately. Once you've reported your concerns, there should only be further contact with you to clarify any details and to notify you of the outcome of any investigations. In the very rare instance that investigations prove a crime has been committed and the prosecution follows, might you be called upon to be further involved by giving evidence, but it will be rarely that you are the only witness involved. And you will be given full support and guidance to present evidence in court, which will be limited to the factual accounting of what you recorded. Other people must be aware, so I don't need to say anything. This is a common response. People try to avoid getting involved in a situation if they can. But if everyone thinks that way, the incident or abuse will go unreported and the situation will continue, leaving that individual vulnerable and possibly further at risk. Delays can make the consequences worse for the individual and the effects longer lasting, and the recovery will take longer. As I said before, every small piece of information reported can be added to every other piece until an overall picture is established. Your small reported safety concern might be the final piece of a jigsaw that enables the abuse or issues to be recognised, stopped, and for the individual to receive any possible help or support they want. If I raise my concerns, it will cause friction in the branch. This is another common worry of people, and perhaps the main reason that they don't raise concerns when they have them. There is absolutely no denying that the potential for friction within the branch will exist if reporting of concerns is handled without tact and discretion. But any concerns raised, whether as a member raising concerns with the welfare officer or the welfare officer raising concerns with the BSAC safeguarding lead, must be handled with respect and diplomacy. Concerns raised should not be broadcast to the wider membership unless the individual concerned wishes to raise it themselves or for an accused person to raise it. Any resulting friction should be contextualised in the light of having the welfare of fellow members at heart. Consider walking in the shoes of the individual. Imagine if you were in that position and consider how you would feel and how you would want the situation to be handled. So now, in summary, we have looked at what Buddyguard is, to whom it applies, why we separate adult and child safeguarding, the principles of self-determination, making safeguarding personal, the well-being principle, signs of abuse, types of abuse, reporting a concern, and common myths and concerns. If you have any questions or wish to raise concerns, please contact your welfare officer or BSAC head office in the first instance, but here are some additional useful contacts and training. I hope that this has answered any questions and addressed any concerns that you may have had about adult safeguarding and has helped you to understand the framework of the safeguarding policy. So finally, I would just like to say thank you for taking the time to listen and to watch this presentation. Thank you and goodbye.